showing, like you're saying, Matt. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You create something, you put it out there, people can see it, they can watch it, they can consume it, they can listen to it. You're putting something there. But the best part is actually the sharing. It's when you can actually, in the one-on-one context, talk to somebody and get to know their heart a little bit better and then lead them. When you're doing both things, where do you find the balance?
Boundaries.
Yeah. Ah, okay.
Yeah. CP Map. We have to read this book by Cloud and Townsend. And they're Protestant writers, but they're licensed therapists, and they wrote a book called Boundaries. And I think they've got a few others. There's like Boundaries in Marriage or Boundaries for Couples or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because, surprise, most of us are awful at boundaries of saying no to things. We have a people-pleasing part that wants to make everyone happy, and so we will do everything for everyone. But then, we don't know how to say no to things.
Yeah.
But why am I burning out? And all sorts of reasons why we can, and most of us were never taught or shown what healthy boundaries look like. So
what do healthy boundaries look like?
I don't know.
Oh man. Well, I mean, because you used burnout, and that isn't what I would have originally associated with boundaries. I just I would have thought for me it would be like asking someone too personal of a question or being willing to share too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have associated burnout with it. So why burnout?
So that's a part of boundaries, though. Exactly
Okay.
what you're saying. That there's sometimes you say something and it's too much.
Yeah.
You're asking the wrong question, or you're trying.
Believe me, Father.
So there's external boundaries. So what does it look like? How does this appear to others? Look at our safe environments policies.
Yeah.
Right? Our safe environments policies are all about boundaries and having appropriate boundaries so that there's nothing that looks like it's the wrong way. You want to make sure that there's no reason to call attention to or to think suspiciously about something.
Right.
Because that's actually protective. Right. If I know that I'm in a room with multiple people, there's people there who can see what I'm doing. That's actually a boundary that helps me to feel safe.
Right.
And so not going, taking a kid to another room one-on-one.
Right.
I know that's not the that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's the boundary, in the confessional, of having a fixed screen.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a reason that canon law says that you have to have a fixed screen in the confessional. That there's got to be a physical barrier, because it actually can eliminate some of the potential for other accusations, because a priest can't talk about what he hears in confession.
Right. If he doesn't see the person.
Yeah. So when you've got that boundary physically there, it's great. But boundaries goes beyond just the physical stuff. And then so you'll get the interpersonal relational stuff. I ask you a question that's too personal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't respect that you don't want to talk about a certain subject. I keep pushing at something. I'm violating a boundary that you have with that. But on the personal level, when it gets to talking about things like burnout, that's the one that I think is the hardest, right? Because I've experienced that burnout. And where does burnout come from? Burnout comes from doing too much, from not really giving yourself time, space, and from always giving. So if you're constantly pouring out, you eventually you're running on empty. I talked to somebody recently who described it as trying to pour from an empty kettle. So you're just desperate for something to come out, but there's nothing in there. So if that's where burnout is coming from, then you learn that boundaries are also about saying it's okay for me to rest.
Right.
It's okay for me to take a day off. I'm not actually essential, right? That's the hardest thing to learn.
Wow, yeah.
Does that resonate for you, Bob?
I mean, I'm
no,
sure
totally.
you know it because you are the most humble man in the world.
I am. But at the school I worked
He
at.
keeps affirming that too.
Yeah, I know. Just more, please. The school I worked at, I also ran the junior and senior high school retreat, and I was hard to delegate because people wouldn't follow through. And so it's just easier if I do everything myself.
Right.
And then I get resentful that I have to do everything myself, but I'm not willing to let go of control. And I'm exhausted by the end of every retreat. And God's showing up and doing his thing, but I've conditioned myself to I have to do everything.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of burnout, I think, isn't it's not the externals. It's not the stuff that I have to do, the tasks that I have.
Right.
It's the stuff that's building up interiorly. So it might be that I'm very busy. I've got a crazy schedule. I've got lots of stuff that has to get done. And the pace of life kind of starts to burn me out. But more often, I think it's that internal monologue of like, I'm annoyed that I'm doing this.
Right.
And now I'm telling myself about how annoyed I am that I'm doing this, or how it's just the same thing over and over again. And it's always like this. And I've got no boundary for myself about what I'm doing, or even a boundary that allows me to talk to somebody.
Right.
Like sometimes you set a boundary for yourself that isn't realistic. You know, like I can't talk to anybody about this. No, please talk to somebody about that. You know?
I mean, it's interesting because, so the first thing is that, and it kind of like confirms a personal experience I've had with burnout, which is, it's kind of like it's an infringement on the person, you know, to ask too much of someone is kind of like a personal offense. And so I know I have personally felt that kind of like negative emotion from burnout, but it also then confirms for me that you bring up the fact that it's really the interior aspect of it that drags someone down, which is really integrated people burn out less, I think. You know, and so it's that call to integration as opposed to allowing yourself to just like wallow in your disintegration, Matt. So yeah, I think it's and at the core of that integration, right, is holiness. You know, so like I don't know, like I guess I don't know Father Mike Schmitz personally. I've watched 85% of his videos.
I don't either. Don't worry,
but
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. But the point is like he strikes me as someone who's pretty holy. You know, and so it makes sense to me that he is able to do so much, because at the end of the day, it's just that he has an integrated life because he, you know, is close to God.
And boundaries is a loving thing. Sometimes we think no is harsh,
right?
Yeah,
but it's like we're not called to be nice. We're called to be loving, and sometimes
Right.
as a parent, it's setting the boundary and saying no. Like I love you enough to tell you no. It's not just walk all over me as a doormat or use me as a punching bag. And so from a vocation standpoint too, boundaries are protective.
Okay.
So I listened to a podcast a while ago and it was called How to Affair Proof Your Marriage. And the thing was, a lot of people will say, it just happened. I don't know how, we just fell into this. And it's like, well, it happened 20 steps ago.
Yeah.
There were boundary infringements that began building up and building up and building up. And there was a disconnect between you and your beloved. For whatever reason, I wasn't feeling affirmed. We're not on the same page. We're just kind of drifting on autopilot. I don't feel connected or loved. I start confiding more into a coworker who's giving me the time of day. We start having our own jokes. The stuff I should be telling to my wife, I start telling to this person. And physical boundaries can start to so it's not that these infringements on vocation just happen.
Right.
There's boundary breakages that are, is that a word? Is that
Sure.
That start the process.
I think I heard breakage in shampoo commercials.
Right. It's hair. It's not anyway. So yeah, the theme of boundaries, it applies to any vocation. And it's a loving thing. And it's also one we have to patiently assess.
Right.
Yeah.
Do I have boundaries? Like, are they too rigid to allow no one in?
Right.
Are they too I'll say no. I won't ever say no.
Right.
And I'll let everyone walk over me for the sake of people pleasing or control. And both, the extremes aren't good.